Well, I think there's a real reckoning right now, with companies. So I think that, there was always a big debate on like, what's the social responsibility of companies?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say over the last 10 years or so, probably culminating right around the murder of George Floyd, companies with that and the climate crisis, there's a whole variety of things like that. Companies more and more felt that they have a responsibility to take on social issues and take a position on that. And whether those are, election laws in Georgia, or whether those are the Florida, so-called, don't say gay bill, or issues on social justice, companies did a lot more than I've ever seen before. And they did it on issues that were contested, right? It wasn't like, in the olden days, the debate, if you go back to Milton Friedman and so forth, was always about what's the scope of responsibility of companies.
Mm-hmm.
But the issues were not contested or controversial.
Yeah.
It was like, it was like safety in manufacturing, or like killing dolphins or stuff like that, right? I mean, there's a universal, maybe not universal, but broad consensus that there are issues here. And then the question is, do companies have a responsibility to address those, yes or no? And we can have long debates on that. But what happened now is different. What happened now is that companies were willing to take a stand on an issue that is polarized right down, within the United States and more broadly, globally speaking. And I think what they underestimated is that once you do that, now you're playing politics, right?
Yeah.
And what happened, of course, is that they took position on one side, and then the other position, Ron DeSantis was probably the first who did that on the Republican side, were pushing back. And you had that on ESG. You had that on DEI issues.
Mm-hmm.
You had that on a whole variety of different things. If you remember, the boycott of Bud Light, which knocked out, 20-25% of their sales, and they're no longer the most popular beer brand in the US. Target, another example like that. So what happened is basically, I think they went into a domain where there was contested politics. Then the other side pushed back, and now all the companies are pulling back. And they're pulling back because there's just nothing to be gained from that. Some will not. Some will stay there.
Yeah.
But, Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, where it's part of their brand. But a Bud Light or Pepsi or companies like that, they're all going to pull back. And I think that's...
Or do you think we go the other way? Like, could you see a scenario where we have like blue companies and red companies, and based on that, you buy your sneaker based on your political affiliation or something like that?
Well, we have, there was like, Goya brands had that, the CEO of Goya was very pro-Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was like, I don't quite see that. I think that just from a business point of view, segmenting on political beliefs is not the greatest idea, because it kind of limits your growth potential. And I think they're all going to pull back, and they're going to have basically a version of institutional neutrality for their business, right? Where they're going to be much, much more careful with these type of things. And that's certainly, I think, what you're seeing, from the big investment banks to many of the companies there. They all got burned, and now they're pulling back.